Welcome to the STEP Annual Performance Reporting webinar. Thank you for joining us today as we go through some important information as you prepare to do your first APR reporting for this grant cycle. We'll go ahead and get disclaimed.
This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number GS00F115CA with Synergy Enterprises, Inc. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred.
All right. Now that you are all disclaimed and set, I'll introduce you to everyone that's going to be talking with you today. I know everyone is familiar with your program officer, Shala Ortega. And then I've met everybody, I believe, on this call. I'm Sarah Brightwell, the technical assistance lead for the OIETA team. And then also joining us today, someone I think many of you have met, but there may be some of you who haven't been able to virtually meet her, Tracy Kara George, another member of our OIETA team. And she's actually going to be kicking off our chat today.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon, everybody, depending on where you're at today. It's nice to be joining you here today for your APR webinar on your STEP for all our STEP grantees. Here on the screen right now, you see our agenda for today. I'm going to go ahead and cover the cover sheet and talk about getting into G5, the information that includes, as well as the executive summary. We will also be going over in G5 the parts A, B, and C. And covering all the different components that you'll be reporting on for your annual performance report. So first, we want to kind of start with the why. It's always important to start with why. Why do we do the APPR, and what is the purpose behind that? Some of you might already be familiar with EDGAR, or the Education Department General Administrative Regulations, but that does require that recipients of multi-year discretionary grants, which is what the STEP grant is, to submit an annual performance report to report on the progress that you're making towards your project goals. The annual performance report, or APR, is a federal requirement, and really this is your primary document that gets submitted on an annual basis, where you can document your progress towards your project objectives, as well as those GOPRO data measures. The Department of Ed uses this information, which is why it's so important, but they use the information to determine if your project is making substantial progress, and then uses that information really to make continuation and award decisions. So this is a screenshot of what you see when you navigate to the G5 platform. Now, not everybody is granted access to G5, but if you are a project director, you should have access to G5. If you do not have access, if you are a project director and you do not have access, you'll want to reach out to the help desk. And right there in the lower left-hand part of the screenshot there, you see some information for how to get in touch with the folks at the help desk. They are open from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's Eastern time, Monday through Friday, of course, excepting those federal holidays. They have a toll-free number, as well as a local number and an email, so that you can reach out to them at your convenience to get access to that. So I will say, if you do not already have G5 access, you will want to reach out to them as soon as possible, today, maybe even, but don't wait until the last minute. Don't wait until your APR reports are due, and you'll save yourself a lot of stress by reaching out ahead of time and making sure that you have that access. On the next slide, we see so the reporting forms that you actually use when you get logged into G5, the reports that you are actually using are referred to, their official title is ED 524B. So that is the official form that you are using. And I see Sarah's dropped that into the chat box there now. If you want to download those PDFs, you can actually take a look at those and follow along. Those are the official forms that you use for both your annual performance report, your APR, and your FPR, or final performance report. They include, so on the screen there, you see the different sections that I indicated that we'll talk through. Those are the same sections that appear in those forms. You can download those both from the website that's on the screen, and we'll be sure to make sure that you get both the slides and the link from today, and you can also download them right now from the chat box if you want to take a look at them right now. All right. So a quick look at the timeline here for your APR reporting timeline. As of May 11th, as of today, your APR applications are available. So if you have access to G5 and you're able to log in, you will be able to access those forms, and you can actually begin entering your information today if you want. In fact, I think we highly recommend, as your TA providers, that you start as soon as possible, sooner rather than later. Again, to save yourself some of that stress from getting up against that deadline. So also today we're holding our webinar. So we'll share all this information for you. It's a good time to ask any questions, as we're covering these sections. If you need any clarifications, that's what we're here for. But also you should feel free to reach out if you're doing this later and after today as well. So your APR submissions are due on Friday, May 28th this year, just a couple of weeks, at exactly no later than 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. And I see that we've also included the seconds 00 on there, just to emphasize the fact that G5 will stop accepting submissions at exactly 4:30. So again, you don't want to be waiting until May 28th and entering all your information. You'll be competing with other folks that are also entering in their information on G5. If you have any experience with G5, you know that sometimes it can be a little bit glitchy, let's say. So you want to make sure that you're in there early enough that you can enter that information, save that information, and that you're not bumping up against that timeline. Again, save yourself some stress from pushing up against too close to that. Yes, just a final note, that deadline is a firm deadline. The system holds no prisoners and will stop accepting information right at 4:30. Okay. So here is a look at the cover sheet, and we'll go over some of the specifics here that you'll be entering into this cover sheet. The cover sheet is 2 pages. The first bit of information that you'll enter is your PR award number. And you'll want to make sure that you enter that information, the full number right at the top there. I think we have a little box to highlight that. There we go. Thank you. And the next information that we want to highlight here is your reporting period, which is actually number 7 on your cover sheet. So your reporting period is from October 1st of 2020 through May 28th of 2021. So now, of course, your grant year will continue, right? It continues through September. But because these reports are due earlier, you're only going to report on what has taken place in your project through that May 28th date. Okay. The next little bit that we want to highlight is actually number 8 here, and this is where we start you start entering information about your budget expenditures. So the amounts that you enter in this section should reflect what you've actually spent or obligated and drawn down from G5. Now you want to be sure that the amounts that you enter into this cover sheet form actually match what's been drawn down in G5. So a couple tips about that. You may not actually have the access to that budgetary or fiscal section of G5 to see how much has been drawn down. So a couple of things you can do. One thing, at a minimum, hopefully you have really good communication, regular communication with your fiscal office, and specifically that person who does the drawdowns in G5, because you'll need to know exactly how much has been drawn down and when. The other thing that you can do is to request view-only access to that fiscal portion of G5. And when you're talking about this with your budget folks, you'll want to be sure that you're clear with them about that you want view-only access, not that you want access to that portion of it. You're not going to go in there to make changes. They want to guard against that. You want to guard against that as well. But the view only access will actually allow you to see when those drawdowns occur and for how much. But you won't be able to actually make any changes yourself. If you need any help with that, if you need any support with getting that kind of access, certainly you can reach out to the TA team for some support with that. Do you want to say something? No? Okay. Very good. Okay. So that's 8. That's 8. But then there is also 8A, B, and C. So let's talk about those real quick. 8A is about the previous grant year. And since everybody here today is a grantee from the 2020 fiscal year or grant year, you actually don't have a previous year. So you're going to leave 8A blank. That can stay blank. 8B, in 8B, you're going to be reporting your total expenditures from October 1st to May 20, from October 1st, 2020 through May 28th, this year, 2021. Okay, it's the same as the reporting period. Now, one thing to keep in mind here too, that when you're entering your information into G5, your fiscal office could be planning some drawdowns for May, so you'll just want to be sure that that's also included in your report. It's also a good time when you're entering this information to take a look at those drawdowns, make sure your office is making them. And so to check on those and make sure that the information that you're entering here is also accurately reported in G5, and that reflects your actual spending. Eight C, this is actually about the final filling this in your final performance report. So 8C, you're just going to leave that blank. Nobody is actually submitting that information at this time.
And Tracy, just one note, because there's been a couple of questions about this. So
Yep.
On the cover sheet for number 8, you're only going to be reporting the total amount of drawdowns that have been completed by May 28th. So yes, you've likely expended more than that because most people do their drawdowns on a reimbursement basis. They might do them monthly, quarterly, depending upon what your fiscal office has set up. But for number 8, and we'll talk about what's different when we get to section B, but for number 8 on the cover sheet, this is solely the drawdowns that have actually been completed. So however much it says in G5 has actually been drawn down this fiscal year for your project is what will be entered for 8B All of that other information regarding your other expenditures, amounts you have obligated, amounts that you spent but haven't actually been drawn down yet, we'll cover all of that in section B. But on the cover sheet, it's solely what's actually been drawn down through G5. Take it away.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate that. Any other questions at this point? Okay, very good. Keep the questions coming. We'll take those. We'll definitely take those as we go along. So number nine is actually about indirect cost. So if you are claiming indirect cost, you'll want to make sure to mark yes on 9A and then complete the applicable options on B through E. Most likely you'll be entering B and then that indirect rate. And the point I want to emphasize here is to make sure that you have that appropriate documentation for your indirect cost rate and that that information has been shared with the Department of Ed and your program officer. Ms. Shala. Number 10 is next on our list here. Everyone should check not applicable. That is about human subject protections and research. So that is not applicable. But on part 11, on part 11, everyone here should mark yes. Part 11 is about data privacy and security information. So if your organization probably has a policy about data privacy and security in a policy and procedures document or handbook, you can just use that, copy that, and include that here. And I see some questions coming in. Did we want to talk about those?
It was another question about 8B. So
sure.
With that, it's not drawdowns you may plan to conduct or that your department may be doing in June, or they're going to do even on, say, that following Monday or Tuesday, because it's a holiday weekend. It's solely whatever's been actually drawn down as of the 28th.
Sarah, if I could just add, this is Shala Ortega. There may be some confusion when it comes to filling this 8B. Don't be confused. It's not that difficult. All you're reporting is what you have actually spent. Now, some of you may be working with your finance department may have a different deadline in terms of when the cutoff date is, when they report something up to that cutoff date. It may not be May 28th. It may be earlier, sooner than that. Whatever it is, whatever their cutoff date is, it's okay. You can report it up to that point. It doesn't have to be up to May 28th when it comes to financial reporting, because of the way your budget office or the finance office may be working. But you also want to make sure that you're as close to that date as possible. So work with your finance office and sort of make sure that the data you're reporting is in agreement with what they show. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Shala.
Thank you both for the clarification. I apologize if I wasn't completely clear, but we want to make sure you get the right information. Are there any other questions about this this part of the cover sheet?
Could we open the mic if we could and see if they have any question when it comes to 8B, or if there is any lingering confusion, so we can clear it up as we go through?
Yes, everybody is open, so everybody should be able to unmute themselves. So you can always unmute and ask your questions aloud or type them in the chat box, whatever is easier and more comfortable for you.
This is Carl. I just want to say thanks. I think I understand it now. So thanks for the clarification. But I was thinking about 8B so hard. I think I missed that whole section on indirect costs.
Go back.
Yeah,
Sure thing. Sure. So number 9 is about indirect cost, right? And if you are claiming indirect cost, you'll want to mark yes on part 9A, and then mark the applicable options on B through E. Most likely you'll be entering B and the indirect rate that you're using. And just the point that I made there too was that you want to make sure that you have the appropriate documentation for the indirect cost rate, and that information has been submitted to Department of Ed.
Okay, now let me just add something. Thank you for clarifying that. On B, because you're a TEA representing the tribe, you probably have your rate agreement with the Department of Interior. I don't think you have one with Ed. I think it's the other under B, and then you have to specify which it is, and I think it's the Department of Interior, but you know best. If you have any doubts as to where your rate agreement comes from, contact your finance office. They should know what that should be, and they can tell you. And if it's your rate should be a final approved rate. You're not using a provisional rate anymore, because you've been, you've are reporting on a full year of almost a full year of your activity. So provisional rates don't apply in this case. It should be a final rate. And I think all of you should have your final rate agreement in place. I believe you all have it, but if you don't, you can send me an email. We can discuss it and see where we can go with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, if they have any questions, I'm here to respond, because this is important, this piece.
So this is Mark from Chugachmit in Anchorage. I did a APR report for another G5 grant that we have, and when I go on that G5 database, I see the step information there too. So I submitted along with that APR report the new indirect cost rate. I attached it to the to G5. Does that record transfer to all the other G5 grants that we might have, or do I have to submit that G5? I mean, I submit on G5 for step the new indirect cost rate.
Yeah, Mark, thank you for your question. I don't think you're a 2020 STEP grantee. If you have any questions about a previous grant you had, you probably want to contact G5 for that. I have no idea if G5 automatically transfers that information to all the grants you have, or just the particular grant that you're putting an APR or an FBR in there for. So my suggestion to you is to contact the G5 help desk and see if they can help you with that.
Thank you. I will.
Great.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to mute myself then. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you. Please continue to ask those questions. So just real quickly, if you missed it the first time, the number 10 was about human subjects. You're going to enter not applicable for that. Number 11 is about data privacy and security information, which you're going to mark yes, and then include a copy of your organization's policy around data privacy and security. Okay, so let's take a look now at that back part of the cover sheet, page 2. This is where you're going to enter some information about your performance measure status. The question that the form asks is, are complete data on performance measures for the current budget period included in the project status chart? So it may be very likely that because we're still in our first year and we're only reporting on activity through the 28th of this month, that for this question, you're recording no, which is totally fine because some of your data may not yet be available. If you do have the data, you do provide it in the report, then you would click yes and you provide that data, and that's great. But if not, make sure to denote when that data will be available, and there's a little place on the form where you put that information for when that data will be available. You want to take a look at what data you'll be reporting on, what data is needed, and then when that will be available. And I know Sarah will talk a little bit more about this when we get to some of the other sections too. The final thing that's needed on this cover sheet is the signature of the official authorized representative. They must sign the completed cover sheet. It has to be a real signature. So you're going to fill out this form, print it off, and then get that signature from your authorized representative. So another tip, make sure you want to do this ahead of time. So sometimes that person might be hard to track down if they're busy and want to make sure that they're around and you're not trying to track them down at the last minute and get that signature from them. But once you get that signature, you're going to take that form, the completed form with the signature. You can scan it. You can take a picture of it. It works best in G5 if you're uploading it as a PDF. One of my favorite applications is CamScan. Maybe you have other apps that you can use. You can use your phone as a scanner and get a PDF and email it to yourself so that you can easily upload that into G5. If I mentioned sometimes G5 can be a little bit glitchy. If you find that PDF just is not uploading for you, if it's giving you trouble, your backup plan then is to email that signed cover sheet to your program officer. If you have any questions about who your authorized representative is, let us know. Don't wait to the last minute, and we can help you out.
This is Mark again. On that other APR form that I did for G5, I had it, and to say that it's glitchy is no understatement. It really was glitchy. But what I I could not bring up this last page of that APR form here. And so I just, out of frustration, I just submitted it. I put completed, and I was so surprised when it came up and that last sheet was automatically filled out and attached to my report. So the name of the authorized representative was typed in there. The signature was typed in with the date of submission. Is that something that was allowable because of the COVID?
So
Mark, here I'm muting myself. Mark, are you a 2020 STEP grantee?
No, we're just finishing our 1 year planning.
Okay, so I think you were an FY 2019 grant. It's
yes,
separate from, we're not covering that today. We're covering the annual performance report for the FY 2020 grantees. It's a separate program.
Oh, so the two
are not the same. No, they're not. They're two separate programs. There's two separate two separate competitions. So if you have questions about your FY 2019 grant, send me emails. We can have a conversation about that separate from this. So this is not going to address your situation. It's for the new grantees who were funded in 2020 for a new program.
Oh, that makes totally good sense then, because we.
No problem. No problem.
I definitely will. I should definitely contact you.
Absolutely. Just contact me and we'll go over the issues you're running into. No problem.
Well, I hope all of you have a really nice day.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay. Any other questions about that cover sheet? Okay, next I'll talk briefly about the executive summary. So the executive summary, like it says on the screen there, it has a maximum of 2 pages that are allowed. And although you might have a lot of things to share and a lot of information to put in there, if you really want to think of your executive summary as sort of the highlights, right? From a really high level, what are the achievements or progress towards your project goals have you accomplished? It's not a full repeat of the information that you're going to enter into section A, but really just an overview of what has been happening since October 1st of last year. If you have so much information that you want to share, Sarah, I know, is going to highlight some other places where it might fit better. So best to think of your executive summary as really that overview. You'll want to share in your executive summary the extent to which you've met your expected outcomes and performance measures. If you are working on, or maybe if you have exceeded those targets. If you're still working on them or you're not quite there yet, you'll want to provide a little information about why that is. If you've met and if you've encountered any hurdles along the way, some of you probably have encountered some disruptions over the past year due to the pandemic. You'll just want to say a little bit in here about those challenges and how those have affected your project implementation. Other things that you want to address in that executive summary, although that last bullet there about contributions, that usually comes in towards the end of your project. But if your project has made any contributions to the research, knowledge, practice, and or policy areas, you can address that here in your executive summary as well. Any questions about that?
So we had one question. The majority of our first year is planning and program design. So do we include things like forms or policies created to implement the program? So yeah, Allison, absolutely. Those are the things that you're doing in order to be able to implement your program. So those are important components of your first year of your project. So those would all be totally fine to include.
Good question. Any others? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah now, and she's going to take us through section A.
Yeah, so once you have completed your cover sheet and your executive summary, then you move into what's honestly the bulk of your report, which are sections A, B, and C. So section A is your project status information, and your pages will look exactly like this. Now, this is the paper form, which is what we popped over in the chat box for you, which is great for planning, but you'll actually be entering this into G5. G5 is set up exactly like this as well. And you'll also notice if you're using your project planner that we went over in February and March, it's set up this way as well, so that if you're doing that planning for your reporting in that project planner, you can actually copy and paste that info directly into G5. So we're going to kind of go step by step through the information that you should include in your section A. The first thing to know is that you're going to be reporting on both your GOPRO and project objectives. So you'll see that it's going to ask you for your project measures here, and it's going to ask you for what type. Okay. When it asks you for what type, what it means is this a GOPRO measure or a project measure? And we'll talk about which ones are which, but your GOPRO are the required measures that you are to report on that you would have seen listed in the notice inviting applications when you were creating your proposal, and that we've talked about a few times throughout the year. The project measures are the ones specifically from your proposal that you wrote for your program. So you'll put either GOPRO, GPRA, or project, PROJ. And here's what that will look like. Now, when you're doing your reporting, it's going to be a little bit different how you'll report for your GEPRA versus your project measure. For a GEPRA measure, you don't have to put these X's in. This is just to denote for you where you will not enter information. The only thing you'll be entering for a GEPRA measure is your actual ratio. For a project measure, however, you'll be entering your target ratio, so your goal ratio, as well as your actual ratio. Okay, so that's the biggest difference in how you'll report on those. GEPRA, only the actual ratio. Project, target, and actual. And we're only ever reporting in ratio. Everything else will be included in that explanation of progress. Now, the GEPRA measures are in particular what helps OIE and the entire department see the progress of your project and grant program as a whole, because all 4 fiscal year 20 grantees are actually doing the same measures. So they're able to measure across the program and track that progress. And Carl, good question. GEPRA stands for Government Performance and Reporting Act. And so these are the ones that are mandated through your grant program that be reported on. So notice data should be reported for, we've got baseline. Your baseline is typically going to be the year prior to your implementation. So that 10/1/2019 to 9/30/2020, or if you're using a slightly different period for your baseline, that's completely fine. Just make sure and denote that in your explanation of progress. And then your current implementation year, so year 1. And remember, your reporting period for year 1 right now is October 1st, 2020 to May 28th, 2021. Okay, so we're just reporting on those about this first little more than half of our project year. If you don't have data available, if there's something that you're still working on and you'll have data by the end of September, by the end of your grant year, but you won't have it by May 28th, that's okay, but you're going to report 999/1 in that ratio box. And that's the sign to Shala and to anyone else reviewing your report that you're gonna have that data, but you don't have it today. There may be other instances where you just don't have the data this year, whether that be because you're not that far in your project yet, or because of maybe some delays you encountered due to the pandemic. If there's not going to be data for that by the end of September, then you're going to report a 0/1. Okay, so 999 is for, I don't have it today, but I'll have it by the end of September. 0 is for, I will not have it this grant year. Then you move into your explanation of progress. So you've reported your quantitative data there at the top in your ratio boxes. And now you move down to the narrative component in your explanation of progress. And this is your chance to provide additional quantitative and qualitative data. Talk about how you've either met or made progress towards your various measures. And if it wasn't met, which many of yours probably will be in progress, that's okay. Talk about why you're not there yet and how you're making progress. What are the steps that you're taking to continue making progress toward this goal? Or maybe a challenge or issue has arisen. Discuss that and how you're handling that. What data have you collected and how are you collecting it? Talk about how you're analyzing and evaluating that data. And briefly describe any related activities and accomplishments that are helping you meet and make progress toward that particular goal. If data aren't available, while that's okay, it makes your explanation of progress all the more important, because you want to be sure that you're really illustrating that you are making progress with your grant, even if the quantitative data is not yet available. So always make sure to provide that narrative information. Okay? The explanation of progress, sometimes folks think, I'm just going to write a sentence or two, or I'm just going to write a sentence that says, I don't have this yet. That's not enough information. You want to paint a really good picture of what's been going on in your project since October. Now let's talk about those GOPRO measures. So when we're thinking about your GOPRO measures, y'all have a total of 7 GOPRO measures to report on. Now you'll notice A, B, and C have a little asterisk, and that's because every one of you will be reporting on A, B, and C. Now D, E, F, and G all are dependent upon what was described in your grant proposal. So some of you will be reporting on those, some you will not. And I have a chart on the next slide just verifying which ones you are going to be reporting on. But just to kind of recap your GOPRO measures, the first one, number A, is the number of capacity building activities offered by the TEA for the SEA or LEA. So these might be trainings that you've offered. Maybe you've done technical assistance with your SEA or LEA. So any of those capacity building activities that you've offered as the TEA. Whereas B is the capacity building activities that have been offered by the SEA or LEA. Okay, so these would be things that have been offered by your SEA or LEA to you as the TEA, which still might be trainings that they've offered that you've been able to participate in, technical assistance in developing your TEA, anything that your SEA or LEA has then been providing to you as the TEA. So you've got both sides of that coin with A and B. Then for number C, the number of education programs that you directly administer. So those are the three that everybody's going to report on. And then the other four that depend on your grant activities are teachers recruited or retained. So the number of teachers recruited or retained to serve students that the TEA serves as a result of the STEP grant. So if you've been doing activities to increase the recruitment or retention of teachers, how many teachers have you impacted through that? Then you have your work-based learning experience programs for E. So the number of those programs that were created as a result of the capacity built using the STEP grant. And I know many of you, these are things that are works in progress, and that's okay. If you know that you'll have at least some data, again, by the end of September, you can put that 999. If you're not going to have any data by the end of September for this, it's okay as well. Put that 0/1. And then one grantee will have actions to open a charter school. So the number of TA actions taken to build capacity to open a charter school. So this could be developing the charter school concept, making a mission statement, an education model, governance structure, each of those kind of intermediary steps getting ready for the charter school. And none of you will be reporting on G, as we don't have any grantees who are taking actions to convert a school. So to recap, you can see for each of you which of the applicable GOPRA you'll be responsible for reporting on. Remember, these are not optional. You must report on them. And the other key here is you have to report on them word for word. So I'm going to go back just to show you what I mean. So you're going to literally go up here, and let's say for C, because it's a nice short one, the number of education programs grantees directly administer. You're going to copy and paste that into that project measure box word for word. You cannot change any of the wording of the GOPRO measures. The project measures, that you have some tweakability because you're in your first year. Your GOPRO measures, though, have to be word for word straight from here. So make sure when you're looking at which ones you're responsible for reporting on, that you're just copying and pasting those directly into your G5 reporting. And yeah, Allison was pointing out there's not going to be a lot of information. So yes, you're not going to necessarily have a lot of quantitative information this year, because there are going to be a lot of things that you're in the planning process for, or you're gearing up. That's okay. Again, if you are going to have some of that information by end of September, put that 999. And if not, put that 0/1. But the really key part to remember here is to do robust explanations of progress, so that even though there's not that quantitative data yet, it's clear the progress that you're still making building up these programs and activities. So let's look at some examples of what this looks like. So you'll see here, this is an example of a GOPRO measure. You can see that I have copied word for word that GOPRO measure into my box here. And then you'll see I'm reporting on my baseline and my year one. So word for word, and then the timeline, either my baseline or year one. Under measure type, I've marked that they're GOPRO. And then you'll notice the only thing I've reported is my actual ratios. So my baseline was that last year there were 10 of these activities offered by the TEA. This year, we're still in progress. We're still offering things. So I've entered 999. That should be over 1. And then an explanation of progress. Okay. So make sure, and you'll have more room. You have up to 4,000 characters for your explanation of progress here. So this is just an example. Now, are we required to fill out the forms for the GOPRO that don't apply? No. So like for you, Allison, because 6 and 7 don't apply, you just won't include those. You'll just include 1 through 5. And you don't have to include 6 and 7 and say they don't apply. All right, so that's what it would look like for GOPRO measures. Now, what about for your project measures? Because that's going to be a little bit different. You'll see now this is a project measure specific to my project. So I've used the wording from my proposal. Now, depending upon how things were worded in your proposal, sometimes they're a little more wordy in the proposal. So it is okay to hone those down in wording. It's okay to make sure that they are smart. You know, we talked a lot when we were doing our project planning reporting webinar about the importance of making sure that our measures are smart so it's easy to report on them and it's clear what we're measuring and what we're reporting on. If you have questions about your project measures, if you want to discuss any of them, you can always reach out to us and we're happy to talk through those as well. But you'll see again that I've got my baseline and my year 1. I've marked PROJ because these are project measures. But then the big difference being I have a target because I want 50% of students to participate in a work-based learning program. And then I've got my actual. So GOPRO was just actual. Now my project, I've got my target and my actual. And before, there were no students participating in work-based learning programs. And as of yet, we don't have any that will this year, but that's what I'm building. So then in my explanation of progress, I'm giving a good explanation of how I am building those work-based learning programs so that students can be participating in that. So really important to have those explanations of progress again. Now, the other thing I want to point out on section A is that the project measures that you enter into your APR this year are what you will use for the next 3 years. So after this reporting period, that sets your project measures. And then they become similar to the GOPRO in that you're just going to copy and paste them year to year. That means that in future reporting periods, you cannot add additional project measures and you cannot take away any of the project measures that you had in this reporting. You also cannot change the wording of them after this. So that's why it's so important that you take this time to really make sure that they are set up exactly as you would like them, because that is what you'll use for your reporting for the entirety of this grant cycle. So for all 3 years. So really important to take that time right now to set yourself up for success throughout the reporting periods. Any questions on section A? All right, then we're going to head into section B. So section B is your budget section. Always easy to remember, B for budget. And this is where you're going to give a lot more detail. So you notice on the cover sheet, it was super basic information, just your drawdowns. As we get into section B, you're going to give more detailed budget information. So when you open up that PDF, you'll see there's just a little section there. You're able to write that and make it longer. That space will expand. So you're not limited to just that tiny little kind of 3rd page section. You can write as much as need be to describe the spending for this current project year. You want to really talk about all of your expenditures in section B. So this is when you get into that detailed information. Talk about the funds expended as well as obligated, even if it's not reflected yet in G5, which will be the case for basically all of you typically. So remember, you're still just talking about your expenditures through 528, but now you're able to talk about those that have not yet been drawn down. Also talk about your G5 drawdown frequency. So ideally, we would love if you would draw down at least monthly, but at minimum, you should be drawing down quarterly. If drawdowns have not been happening for your organization, or if drawdowns maybe have been extremely small, then you're definitely going to want to talk about why you're drawing down with the frequency with which you are, and why you might not be expending funds at the rate that would be anticipated. You also want to talk about any funds that you believe you'll have unexpended on September 30th. So of course, we want you to make every effort to expend all of your funds the way that you described them in your grant proposal by the end of this grant year. But we will ask you to think about if you at this point think you're going to have some carryover left at the end of this grant period, how much do you think that would be? Why do you have that? And what will you be using it for? When I send out the recording, I'll also share with you the optional budget reporting form that I know many of you are familiar with from your other OIE grants or from previous reporting cycles. That's really a nice, easy tool to use in order to make sure that you're providing all the information that Shala needs to be able to look at your budget. It is optional, but it is encouraged, because if you do not use that form, you will still need to provide all of that same information in another format, whether it be through an extended narrative or your own form. Now, as you think about that carryover, I know Shala had a few things that she wanted to share with you as well, as you're thinking about explaining your budget and explaining any potential carryover.
Thank you, Sarah. I know I've talked to some of you, but not all of you. So this budget section is actually very important when it comes to determining the next year's, continuation funds. And your explanation of your budget information can go a long way to provide you full funding for next year, or maybe reduced funding. And the reason I'm mentioning that is that if you have, and we know we all had to go through the COVID situation in the past year, and that slowed down a lot of things quite a bit. But my suggestion to you is that when you're going through your budget information, you want to be very clear in explaining why you have carryover, if you have any, and you might have some carryover at the end of the grant cycle that you're reporting, but try to keep your carryover at the minimum, because if it's a large amount, then and I don't want to put a percentage on it, but if it's a large amount, we may, and you don't have a good explanation of why you ended up having such a large amount, you may see a reduced amount for your next year's award. The other thing I wanted to mention is that for your budget, it's a very good idea to report on your what you plan to do with the portion of the funds you're not going to spend, but you have some sort of shows you have some sort of plan how you're going to spend it. Either spend it by excuse me, the end of September this year, meaning you have a plan. You haven't spent the money yet, but you do have a plan what you're going to do with it by the end of September this year. And or if there is something that you need to carry forward, say the activity and the money into your next grant year, why you're doing it and what you plan to do with it. So this budget information can be extremely critical in not only determining how well you've been doing, because if you're accomplishing what you set out to do, then you have to be spending money to accomplish it. But also for us to have a good idea of where you are in terms of your the funding situation. Does anyone have any questions about the carryover or obligated balances and stuff like that? I'm here to answer any question you have on the budget. Anyone? I think the mic is open.
Yes.
Yeah. If you feel more comfortable to type something in the chat box, go ahead and do that.
And also, as you're mulling over, you know, kind of what we've talked about at the budget, we'll have another question section at the end too.
And if you don't have any questions right now, but you run into it as you're doing your report, feel free to contact me. This isn't the only time you can ask it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sounds like there are no questions at this time. So.
Yeah, none just yet. So we will hop over to section C. Oh, Allison just popped one in. Let me see here. 1 second, Allison, I have to get it to open. So that would have some of the information, but you would be able to use that to complete your optional budget form, but it wouldn't necessarily have all of the information in there.
There is a comment about indirect cost. Says you can see that we haven't taken our indirect cost.
Mm-hmm.
The indirect cost that you take is going to be only on the portion that you have actually spent. That's the only indirect cost that you're going to be reporting. Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, well, we'll jump into section C. And if you think of any other budget questions, feel free to hop in with those, pop them in the chat box, or we'll stop for questions after this next section as well. So section C is your additional information section. As we look at section C, there's a lot of different things that you can include here. You have a lot of flexibility. We'd like for you to make sure and document or highlight any particular success stories, big challenges that have occurred. Make sure to definitely include the status of your partnerships. So just updating on your partners and how those partnerships are going, any new partnerships, any partnerships that have dissolved, and any key personnel changes. Please keep in mind that any changes to your project director would still need to go to Shala for approval outside of your APR report. You can also talk about any planned changes to project activities for the remainder of the year. Talk about any specific impact that COVID-19 has had on your grant activities and grant budget. And then any other appropriate information about the status of your project. So sometimes we'll see folks who maybe are including some pictures. If there was a chart you wanted to include, maybe in section A, because it won't accept it there, you can include it here. If your executive summary was running long and you couldn't fit everything into those 2 pages, you can always put that additional information here in section C. If any of your explanations of progress in section A were too lengthy for that 4,000 character limit, you can put that in section C. Section C, really, you can put whatever additional info you want to share with the department here. This is just the information we'd like you to be sure and include. Now, with section C, it is an upload area. So you're able to upload a document for section C. I highly, highly, highly suggest that you upload a PDF. So put all of your information together into one PDF. G5 has a much easier time accepting one PDF upload than any other file format or multiple documents. So really big encouragement there to go with the one PDF file. It will save you a headache trying to upload anything else. And know that there is a 10 megabyte limit. So anything larger than that, or if you get super close, if you're at like 9.9, 9.8, sometimes it will reject it. So just make sure and stay under that 10 megabyte limit. Now know that your APRs are the primary thing looked at in regards to your continuation awards. The department will make every effort to process those by the start date of your anticipated new budget period. However, if APR reports are not submitted on time, if they have missing information, or if you've not made substantial progress, then there could be a delay in receiving your continuation award. Also, OIE will update you about any carryover requests. So remember that you shouldn't assume that your carryover request is automatically accepted or approved. You do want to wait until you actually hear back on those. And a few final reminders. Remember, G5 is currently open for reporting. You can go in there today if you'd like. So you can be entering that information. It is just the grant project director of record that can submit the report in G5. However, one of the great things if you are using the project planner is that all of you can be in that tool, working together, putting together your report, and then just copying and pasting it into G5 so that it can be more of a team reporting effort. Remember that it's not going to accept your report after May 28th at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. I got multiple calls and emails after the reporting period for a couple of the other OIE grants last week, where people didn't think about the time change. And so it was, say, 7:30 Eastern, but it was 4:30 in their time zone. And they couldn't figure out why G5 wouldn't take their report, because G5 works off of DC time. So you have to have that done by 4:30 Eastern, which I know for some of you makes that report due at about noon. But really, really important to keep that time difference in mind, because it will shut off at 4:30, at which point you will no longer be able to submit in G5 and you'll need to contact Shala. Also remember that after you submit your report, you're not going to be able to go back in to revise it. So make sure that when you submit, you mean it. You're really done. It's really what you want it to say. If that means you've double checked it, triple checked it, but once you submit it, you're not going to be able to bring it back and make those changes. And then the final ones that everybody just has that last reminder that it's due May 28th, 4:30 Eastern in G5. You can use those paper forms for planning, but you're going to be submitting in G5. Any other questions?
So this, you can't hear me very good. But when I do the GRPA, what do you call them, or GPRA, GEPRA?
Huh? Yeah.
Do I just cut and paste from the NIA, basically?
Yeah, you can cut and paste from the NIA, as well as I'll send them out so you can cut and paste from there as well.
Okay, and then for the project ones, I just need to make sure I word those similar to what I did in the project narrative when I submitted them, but they don't have to be exact.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. This will work. Thank you. I appreciate you guys' help on this. I have to admit, and I said this in the chat, the last step grant, Shala probably just rolled her eyes and laughed more than once when she saw my report. But this one, Shala, will be much better.
I'm glad to hear it, Coral.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. All right. Thank you.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
Our goal is to make the reporting as pain-free as possible. Well, and this is a good time to point out that, remember, we're having the webinar today and providing this information. We'll follow up with an email with kind of the recap of the info. But if you have questions after this, you can reach out to Shala. She's here to assist you. You can reach out to the TA team. We're here to help you as well. So you're not on your own. It's not just set loose and good luck. We're all here to support you and help you be able to do a great APR report and really show the things that you've been working on this year. Well, also, I want to make sure everybody saw that our talking circle was rescheduled, since it was going to be tomorrow immediately after this. We went ahead and pushed that to May 26th, which will be 2 days before your report is due. So that'll also give you one final chance there, that if you have some last minute questions and things like that, we can have a time then to chat about it as well. All right, any others? As you're thinking about any final questions, I do want to share our final feedback poll. You will see this week that we have changed it up a little. So based on not the greatest response rates on the feedback survey, it's not that the responses were bad. We love your responses when you're responding, but we weren't getting tons of people filling out the feedback surveys in SurveyMonkey. So we've gone ahead and changed up our final feedback poll here on Zoom so that you can actually do everything right here in the Zoom window. So if you see that poll popping up, if you could complete your feedback poll, and you won't even have to go out to SurveyMonkey. It will just magically take care of it through Zoom here. It is still anonymous the way that the survey is in SurveyMonkey. So you can give us your honest responses. The only change is that because it's in Zoom, we don't have a way to give you that short response one that we always do at the end of the SurveyMonkey one, asking if you have any other questions or feedback or things that were particularly helpful or things you'd like to see next time. So we'd ask that if you have any information for that, please share that in the chat box. You can put it in the public chat box, or you're welcome to private message it just directly over to me if you don't want it as a private, if you don't want it as a public comment. But we do still enjoy and make use of all of that short answer information, but we're just trying out something a little different this time to see if it's easier for folks to complete their feedback surveys directly here in the actual meeting. So I appreciate it. It looks like most of us have completed that feedback survey. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. I'll just wrap up with our contact information. So just in case you've misplaced Shala's email or the email for the TA team, like I said, we're here to help you. We want to make the reporting as pain-free as possible. So if you have any questions, large or small, please take a moment, reach out. We're here to help. And then we'll also stay on the line for a few minutes if any of you have more questions today. Otherwise, have a great Tuesday.